Well, hey folks, it's your old pal King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Hit like and subscribe. In my very last video, I ended off with a little analogy about, you say you like a hamburger, but you want to replace the meat with chicken and take off the cheese. And so, do you really like hamburgers? Is that still a hamburger kind of a thing? It got me thinking about the old ship of Theseus, which has been, kind of made more relevant and wide known thanks to WandaVision earlier this year. Or was that last year? It's so hard to tell anymore. Time has become so warped since 2020. And how that relates to what's kind of been going on with Dungeons and Dragons, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Ghostbusters, just any slew of these old intellectual properties, that we all have to deal with here on YouTube. Now, it's not a perfect analogy, although and the differences though, and the things that make it not a perfect analogy, I kind of think are really where the meat of this particular sandwich is to be found. So, if, just to refresh everyone, the ship of Theseus, you get a boat builder builds a boat, sails out to sea, he's out at sea at a long time. Some of the planks rot, get wet, have barnacles grow on them, have to be replaced, and after a couple of years, by the time they get back, the ship is like 95% made out of materials that were not there a part of the original ship, and so is it still actually that ship. You can make an argument that to some degree that, all these years later with Dungeons and Dragons, let's say, since this is mostly a gaming channel, you got a ship of Theseus scenario go on. You had your original boat builder, Gary Gygax, and they set on this boat out to sea, and years and years and years later, occasionally they got to rip out an old piece of rotten wood and replace it and all that kind of stuff. And here we are. It's different, and yet it's still the ship of Theseus. It's still the D&D of Theseus. Which, as I said, I'm the one coming up with this, so it's not like I'm arguing with anybody over this particular subject. It's kind of like a self-debate, just trying to kind of mull over whether or not the analogy fits and how well. So I guess the major flaw with my own analogy there, in regards to Dungeons and Dragons specifically, or quite a few movie entertainment things, is that it's not the same ship. The intent of, the idea of the story of Ship of Theseus is that, the boat's out there and they're trying to keep the boat afloat so they can get back home. And so the reason why it's still the same ship is everything that's been done to alter the ship is really been there to maintain the ship. They're replacing broken parts. They're replacing things that need to be replaced in order to keep the ship as a whole, functioning and afloat and able to navigate and all that kind of stuff. The thing is what's going on with a lot of these intellectual properties is not quite that. They're not trying to just keep it afloat. They're removing things and not replacing them because they've decided that certain planks of wood are problematic, and they're occasionally bolting things onto it that have nothing at all to do with being a ship at sea. The tendency to try to make things as palatable as possible to as wide an audience as possible, will remove some of the things that made the popular intellectual property originally a niche product, because, the fact that it didn't immediately have mainstream appeal was a sign that it wasn't necessarily built that way. But in order to be able to attain that mainstream appeal, you're kind of watering down the product, and you're not, you're replacing the wood with plastic, kind of, I guess, is a way to read that. But also, this tendency, because of that, because of what a mainstream thing is supposed to have, it's supposed to include these, elements 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if those elements aren't in the original niche version of the intellectual property, well, they'll just start bolting it in. Like the way they trying to turn Ghostbusters into an action movie franchise, and so on and so forth. To some degree, if you want to include some of the political decisions that are made behind the scenes as to, various factors that go into shows nowadays, you can view that a little bit maybe as another one of those things. They're bolting something on there that didn't need to be there and kind of changes the essential nature of what the thing is supposed to be. Also, it'd be more of a ship of Theseus if as I said, like if there was the genuine intent just to maintain the thing. It's not like these intellectual properties have been bought by a single individual because they had a great idea that they wanted to see done to sequelize or maintain or continue some story written by someone else. The Lord of the Rings was not, the rights to it were not purchased by one dude who's a writer and just had this idea of like how to write out the second age story. And he had this strong vision, and he went around from studio to studio pitching it until someone finally decided to give him a chance and roll the dice and see if it works. All these intellectual properties are all bought by corporate entities. They're not creative people. They're these quasi-existent pseudo, almost like corporations are almost like demigods in a way. They exerted a tremendous amount of influence, and yet they don't exist. They're just kind of written up into the mutual obligations and contracts that bind all the people in the corporation together as a working unit. But since they've decentralized the things, and you typically don't have a singular person who ultimately pulls all the strings, at least officially. They're non-entities, and so a non-entity can't really, have desires and intent and ideas. It's still relied upon its component pieces. These corporations, they buy these branded intellectual properties because they're popular, they have recognition, there's a nostalgia factor, all the various reasons that, like, why an individual would want to try to, make a Star Wars sequel or, buy the rights to Batman and make more Batman stuff or whatever. But they don't really care. The company is incapable of actually feeling anything. It's why it always bothers me when I hear, corporate speak statements about how, our corporate values. A corporation is not a thing with a brain. It has no ability to have values. And the individuation of all the individual members who are a part of that corporation, they're not ever going to be Borg-like, lock in step with each other 100%. So, you can't really say that the corporation as a whole actually has a specific set of values. There might be general trends in how the people working for it think of things, but it's not going to be a universal Venn diagram overlap, and it's lending this non-thing an existence in a way, in the same way that our belief in a lot of different things kind of buoy it. An old example I always liked was, people can look back in time to ancient Greece and pretty confidently, be like, the Greek gods weren't real. They were just, mythological stories told around campfires, blah, 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 blah. Except the people living back then, despite the fact that we know for a fact that Zeus and Apollo and Athena weren't real, the people then at the time believed very hard that they were real and would base their decision-making process off of what they think the gods would want them to be doing, which lends the gods kind of a pseudo-reality. And that's kind of the thing I'm talking about with a lot of these mass entities we make for ourselves. To me, I kind of just feel like it's the human hive mind. It is governments and religions and corporations and such. But so this thing, it just wants to make money. It doesn't really care about what made it special. It doesn't actually have a specific idea or any kind of inspired notion of why it wants to do the thing. It doesn't care about maintaining its original form. It doesn't give a shit about the boat of Theseus. It just wants to basically buy the materials and then just resell them to people, piecemeal even. Just chop it up into bits. And hey, here's your piece of the boat of Theseus, and here's your piece of the boat of Theseus. And you can make it look like however you want, guys. We'll do whatever, we'll suck as much cocks as it takes to get you to buy our version of the boat of Theseus. But when you're making something like that broad in intent, without a specific vision behind it, especially when you're talking about stories, then that's not a ship anymore. The pieces of the cross sold as reliquaries and shit do not in and of themselves get to be the cross upon which Jesus was nailed, kind of a thing. they've been transformed into something different by being chopped apart and changed in their intent and how you framed them and all that kind of stuff. All these new things are just what they're claiming to be in name alone. But the ship of Theseus sunk long ago. I don't know. Sorry for bumming y'all out. Stay waspinated.